Hi, Internet people. I'm here today with Jules. Say hi, Jules. She's a Senegal Parrot. She's actually normally my bestie, but she has been in a snit for about a week and a half or so. Hasn't wanted to talk to me. I'm not sure what I did to earn her ire. Thanks for talking. But she's been mad, and so I'm making her come out. She hasn't been wanting to come out of her cage, and she's been very angry, and she just had a massive temper tantrum about it. So we're going to try to be nice to each other right now, but there might be violence in the middle of this book review of Isabel and the Rogue. This is the second book of the Luna Sister series by Liana de la Rosa. I didn't actually know this one was out until I read about it on one of those end of the year best book lists. I think it may have been New York Times or NPR or something like that. I read the first book in this series, Anna Maria and the Fox, a couple years ago, and I really liked it. And the reason that I think this is a good series to talk about is the reason why I think it's really important to seek out authors with different perspectives. In this case, an author who isn't white, who is writing in historical fiction that takes place in 1865 in England. The perspective that she brings is that the women in these books are Mexican. The setup is that there are three daughters who have been sent from Mexico when the French invaded Mexico, and they are the daughters of high officials in the displaced Mexican government. They're sent for their safety to England. Also, they're supposed to be sort of rallying people to the Mexican cause. Hey, Julesy, there might be violence. Yeah, I don't quite trust her right now. And that brings a depth of perspective that a lot of times you don't always see in these historical fiction novels. One thing that people bring up with these is that a lot of times you'll be seeing these English dukes and counts and countesses, and I guess not counts, then that's Dracula, but they never talk about the source of the wealth. And the wealth in these time frames is colonialism, exploitation, things like that. And I want to just read one excerpt from here where they talk about, at a dinner party, they start talking about colonialism. And the point of this dinner party is that they're looking at a collection of artifacts from Ethiopia. It's a move that comes from the colonizer's script, I'm sure. Identify a region in flux and sweep in to either grasp power, destabilize the current government, Gabriella ticked off these items with her fingers, or loot what resources or treasures can be found while the local people are unable to protect it. I'd wager that is exactly how this museum came to possess the objects in its collection and possibly a good deal of other items on display. The older gentleman opened and closed his mouth for a moment before he grasped his glass of wine and took a drink. Artifacts need to be protected, and if a mother country cannot do it, it's the responsibility of others to step in and do so. Responsibility? Isabella interjected. Why is it that there's a responsibility to things and not to people? It's a really good point, and that's something that people should be thinking about now. I mean, I still hear that when they're talking about things like the Parthenon, that, Greeks can't protect it, so it should be in the British Museum. I mean, that's an argument that's still going on today. You move down a little farther in here, it says, you spoke of responsibility, of how artifacts and historical items should be protected, and I'm asking of why such things warrant more protection than the people who made them. Isabel winged up a brow. I'd wager that whoever swept into Africa to save these cultural objects that we've been admiring this evening did not even think of how they could assist the Ethiopian people, whether by offering them food or shelter or aid. The older man laughed, and several other gentlemen at the table snorted. Sirius ground his teeth together. It's not the museum or the British government's responsibility to aid the people, just to protect their riches, Isabel interjected. And that's why I like this series. We've got it's a little bit deeper than just, I need to find a man. which, you know, I don't have a problem with. I read a lot of historical fiction, but, you know, I do like that. The other thing I like in this series is author note talks a little bit more in depth about some other writers that she talks about in the series. And this is one person I hadn't heard about before. I'll read, this is from the author's note. Sor Juana, as Isabel referred to her, was a colonial Mexican writer and the first published feminist in the Americas. In one word, she was a badass. Born in 1648 in what was then called New Spain, Sor Juana was a poet, dramatist, scholar, and nun. And during her time at the convent of Santa Paula, she acquired one of the largest private libraries in the New World, a role model Isabel could aspire to. In a time when most women did not have access to an education, Sor Juana maintained a correspondence with scholars and members of the court and received the patronage of the viceroy and vicereine of New Spain for her scholarly pursuits. Her many writings are studied to this day, and almost 330 years after her death, because of their range of emotions, themes, and even languages. In one infamous example, her poem Hombres Necios, Foolish Men, implicates men of the same nonsensical behavior that they accuse women of. Sor Juana was a brilliant trailblazer, which also made her a target, and after immense pressures from members of the Catholic Church, she set aside her literary pursuits and renewed her religious vows. Yeah, of course she had to. Her expansive library was even sold for arms. Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz died in 1695 and is revered as a national icon of Mexico and Mexican identity. I hadn't heard of her before, but she'd be cool to look up. So this is definitely a really good book. Even if you weren't into the history, which you definitely should be, you'll learn a lot about that. It's a good story, and definitely looking forward to the third book, which is supposed to be coming out in 2025. Put that on my TBR list. If you want to know more about the history of colonization in museums, I'll link down in the description another book that's really good about that. It's called Loot by Sharon Waxman. Talks about museums and the problems with stealing artifacts. Really changes the way you look at a lot of museums, and actually talks a lot about a museum that's very local to me, and one of their pieces that at the time was front and center, and over time they've sort of moved it into the back, and now it's off display because it was totally stolen. So say hi, say bye, Jules. Yeah, okay, she's not gonna say bye, but at least there was no violence, so talk to you later.